We'll let you hold the baby. Take care of us.
Everybody, welcome here this evening. If you're able to, invite you to stand with us as we begin to worship here tonight.
King of heaven,
lifted high. King of heaven, come now. King of heaven, come now. Let your glory reign, shining like the day. King of heaven, come. King of heaven, rise up. Who can stand against us? You are strong to save. In your mighty name, King of heaven, come. 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 King of heaven, come down. King of heaven, come down. King of heaven, come down. Let your glory reign, shining like the day. King of heaven, come. King of heaven, rise up. Who can stand against us? You are strong to save. In your mighty name, King of heaven, come. Strong to save. You are strong to save. In your mighty name, King of heaven, come. One time, you're strong to save. You are strong to save. In your mighty name, King of heaven, come. Amen. Father God, we welcome you here tonight, Lord. We acknowledge your presence with us. Father, I pray as this evening continues, Lord, we would just press into this time, press into your presence, the truth of who you are, Lord. You just ever be present in our mind. Father, would your spirit fall on this place, Lord. Let us leave this place having come to know you more. There's nothing worth more that will ever come close. Nothing can compare. You're our living hope. Your presence, Lord. I've tasted and seen of the sweetest of loves, when my heart becomes free and my shame is undone. Your presence, Lord. Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. Come flood this place and fill the atmosphere. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long for. To be overcome by your presence, Lord. Your presence, Lord. There's nothing worth more that will ever come close. Nothing can compare. You're our living hope. Your presence, Lord. Let us experience the glory of your goodness. Let us become more aware of your presence. Let us experience the glory of your presence. Let us become more aware of your presence. Let us experience the glory of your goodness. Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. Come flood this place and fill the atmosphere. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long for. To be overcome by your presence. Holy Spirit. Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. Come flood this place and fill the atmosphere. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long for. To be overcome by your presence, Lord. Father, that is our prayer tonight, Lord. We would become more aware of your presence and experience the glory of your goodness. Thank you that we get to do this, Lord. Thank you that you ask us to do this. We can just come before you, just be in your presence, Father. What a gift that is. Help us to not let this just become just a routine, a thing that we do once a week. Lord, help us to cherish these times, Lord. Help us to really press in. In Jesus' name. Break the chasm that lay between us. How high the mountain I could not climb. In desperation, I turned to heaven and spoke your name into the night. Through the darkness, your loving kindness tore through the shadows of my soul. The work is finished, the end is written. Jesus Christ, my living hope. Hallelujah. Help us to hold on to the truth that we sang, Lord. You've broken every chain. What we sang in that second verse, what heart could fathom such boundless grace? The God of ages would step down from glory to wear our sin and bear our shame. That next line is so important. The cross is spoken, I am forgiven. The King of Kings calls me his own. So Father God, help us to walk in that forgiveness, Lord. The truth of your mercy and your grace. You are good. We love you. Praise in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Take a seat.
Welcome to Canvas Church, and so glad that you guys are here tonight. And if we've met you before, then welcome back. If we have never met you before, thank you so much for being here tonight. This is your first time. So glad that you have decided to come and be with us tonight. And so I want to welcome you. And before I introduce a special guest tonight, I want to thank everybody who helped with the Oak Bay Tea Party Parade. That's a mouthful. Yesterday. So last year, I emailed the lady who was organizing the Oak Bay Tea Party, and I'm like, man, we want to be a church that serves our community, and what is it that you need us to do? I said, well, where we really need volunteers is at the parade, just manning the barricades. You know, it's not glamorous, but that's where we need people. So I said, well, we'd be happy to be there. Of course, back then, we didn't really have much of a church yet. So we're like, now I got to go. I got to put my money where my mouth is. I'm like, I've got one volunteer, and now I need to go find some more. And we've got about 10 people, which is about half of the volunteer force that they needed. And so another group brought the other half, and it was a great time. Did a great job. This year, they contacted us and said, would you come back and volunteer? So you guys must have made a good impression, and so we will, and put the word out. And this year we doubled that. We brought 20 people, and we were the volunteer force at the Oak Bay Tea Party Parade. And so if you were one of those who was there to help, or if you were one of those who prayed for us while we were there, thank you so much. What a beautiful thing. And of course, I forgot to get a group picture to remember this. I know I always do forget. But to look out and to see 3 generations volunteering together, to see a father and son volunteering together, to see new friends who have just become friends recently volunteering together, to see 3 generations, families, siblings, amazing to me. the family of God, volunteering together, serving, reflecting Jesus. He said, I came not to be served, but to serve. And showing that aspect of who Jesus is to our community by saying, hey, we don't want to ask anything from you. We want to give. We want to come and to serve. And so thank you guys so much for being a part of that. And if you're like, man, I missed that Saturday, but would love an opportunity. This Saturday, I pretty much did the same thing. We had a big garage sale event coming up in Oak Bay, Garage Millennium. Don't ask me how to spell that. I always have to look at it before I spell it. But Garage Millennium, big event that happens every year, and we're thinking, how can we become a part of this? And what if we provided something for families to do at lunchtime? And so I just offered. I met with the lady who was organizing it, and I met with people at Municipal Hall and said, hey, can we provide some bouncy houses, and can the Frederick family bring their food truck, and can we? And before we knew it, they were fast tracking it through to be approved, and they said we would love to have you do that. And so we're going to have all set up behind the Municipal Hall this next Saturday. Have some bouncy houses for families, give out free freezies, and have the food truck there, and they're blocking off the parking lot to set up tables and tents for lunch. And so if you want to be a part of that, just for that morning into just early afternoon, just after lunch, there's a sign-up sheet at the back. You can sign up and be a part of that. I want to introduce a special guest tonight. My family, my parents are in town this past few days and into next week, and so my dad, Richard, is a speaker that has many years of experience preaching and teaching the Bible all over the world. And when you've got a guy like that come into town, it's not hard to step aside and say, you know, these guys hear from me every week, but I want to give them a treat this week and go get some wisdom from the patriarch. And so I'll let my dad come on up and take it from here. But would you give him a Camas Oak Bay welcome, all the way from Atlanta, Georgia?
It has been to be with all of you, and I watch most Sunday evenings, and I live in Atlanta, and so this service is at 9 o'clock my time, Sunday evening, and it pops up on my screen at 9 o'clock, and so I watch this live stream, but mostly all I get to see are the people up here. I don't get to see all the beautiful people in the audience, and I can hear you. I can hear you, catcalling the speaker and other things, but it's great to actually see your faces here tonight. And for my wife Lisa and I, we pray for you, and I'm so excited for you. Of course, we follow this church very closely, and there's a lot of people who know Mike and Sarah that pray for this church all over the country, all over the states. I traveled. I was in another state, Florida, just not long ago. People came up and how's Mike's church doing up there in Victoria? We all pray for them. And I go all over the place. People are praying for you. And so I don't know if you know that there's, sometimes you see the people here, but you don't know that there's a lot of people across North America excited about what God is doing here. And so you're part of something very special. I'm in churches all over the world, and I can just tell you that this God is up to something here. And what an exciting thing to be a part of the beginning. Sometimes we see big cathedrals that have been around for hundreds of years, and we're impressed with that. But you know what? Even those churches began just like this. And what an awesome thing to be at the front end of something, to be the beginning, where you can actually have input to say, I've always wanted to be a part of a church that did this and cared about that. And you can actually help this church be that church. Isn't that exciting? You don't drop into a church in a big crowd and you don't make a difference, but right now, as the church is growing and beginning, you're an important part. And so I want to commend you for investing yourself here, because 100, 200 years from now, people will see this church impacting all of Victoria and the world, and they'll say, what were those people thinking back in the early days when that church got started? And you'll be able to say, I was one of those people, and I got to be a part of something. I want to talk a bit about that tonight, just the fact that there's lots of ordinary things in life, and then sometimes you stumble into something that's extraordinary. And I'll tell you what, one of the most important things for a Christian is to always be able to recognize what's important in life and what is not. You see one of my beautiful little 4-year-old grandson back here, that's Everett. That's why we travel 2,800 miles. I tell Mike it's to see him, but really he knows the truth. It's to see these adorable 3 grandsons that we have here. But Everett actually has 2 cousins that are his age as well, 4-year-old cousins. And one of the things that we've done for a number of years, I have this friend who has this beautiful little townhouse in Destin, Florida. Now, when I was starting out, I prayed, God, do one of 2 things for me. Either make me rich or give me rich friends. And I've learned, don't ever give God an option, because he may not pick the option you were hoping for. And so God has just blessed me with some people that know how to bless me. And so I have a friend, and he has this place in Florida. And so Mike and Sarah have joined us several times, and we've had 4 grandsons there. And I always get the idea that I'm going to be like writing books up on the top level of this place, having great inspirational thoughts. I mean, what could 4 grandsons, I'm 4 and under, do to disrupt my great thinking, you know? So I'm up at the top, and let me introduce you to, here we are. This is Everett's 2 4-year-old cousins that were born just 10 days before him. If you ask him, who is that, Everett? Who are those guys? Emerson and Logan. He knows his cousins. So one day, I'm up on the top level, and I'm working on stuff. I've got to go preach a bunch of places after that week while everyone else is at the beach. And all of a sudden, Logan, he's the boy on the left, all of a sudden, I hear him just giving a blood-curdling scream. I mean, it sounds horrible. And there's like a bunch of staircases in this timeshare, and I'm sure that he has tumbled down 1 or 2 flights of stairs, and who knows what kind of tangled mess he is at the bottom of that staircase. I don't know if I should just call 911, or I think, well, I should at least maybe I need to staunch the bleeding, grab him and regain consciousness. And so I'm running to the top of the stairs, trying to figure out where's the damage, where is this child? And as I'm starting to go down the stairs, I hear his parents talking. And they don't seem as concerned as they ought to be for people who need to be calling an ambulance. And what I discover as I listen in is that he actually has not fallen down the stairs. He and his brother and Everett, I assume, all come in from the beach, and they're getting changed out of their swimming attire. Well, Logan and Emerson are in the midst of potty training. And Logan now wears big boy underwear. And so his mom has taken off his wet swimsuit, putting on his, and he actually has, and you guys all know this, this is made in Canada, but of course, let's see if I can get this to work. You go ahead and move that up for me. Oh, there we are. He's got Paw Patrol underwear. And you know Paw Patrol. This is Marshall, the hero fireman dog. And so this should be a good thing, right? He's getting this wet swimsuit off, getting Paw Patrol underwear on. The problem is that I don't know what the manufacturer was thinking, but when he put Marshall on the underwear, he put it on the back of the underwear, not on the front. Now, of course, we all realize you cannot see Marshall if he's on the back. You can only see him if he's on the front. And so Logan insists that Marshall be on the front, and his mother's trying to explain. She's somehow bound by all the rules of manufacturers' guidelines. And she's explained to him, no, Marshall goes on the back, not the front, and hence the breakdown, the blood-curdling breakdown. I'm thinking to myself, all of that because he can't wear his underwear backwards? My goodness, of course I'm thinking as his grandfather, I would have just let him wear his underwear backwards. What's the big deal? Let him wear his underwear on his head if he wants to. I mean, whatever makes him happy. And as I'm walking away, I thought to myself, children are so silly. They get worked up about the silliest things. I'm so glad that when we become adults, we don't do that anymore. That when you grow up, you just realize, oh, this matters, this does not. But isn't it sad? And of course, when I look back on my own life, I realize so many of the most unpleasant, regretful moments in my life have occurred over things that really didn't even matter. And sometimes the things that really did matter, I didn't care enough about at the time. And as Christians, if there's anything we need to know, when we're having a conversation, when we're talking to people, when we're at work, when we're at church, when we're just going about our day, we need to always make a beeline for what matters and not get worked up about what doesn't. There's all kinds of stories I could tell you. I want to introduce you just to one character, Sam Andrews. Sam Andrews was a businessman, an entrepreneur, was a part of starting a startup company in 1870. And he had about 3 or 4 other partners, and they're starting this company, and it's growing, and they're investing. But Andrews began to get pretty upset about how business was going. Because one of his partners had all these grandiose ideas about building his company. Sam just wanted to make money. He wanted to get enough money to build a nice house. In fact, he wanted to build the biggest house in the city. He wanted to show off his money. And instead of getting all the money to build a big house, his partner would always suggest, well, let's invest back in the business. Let's roll over the profits and expand the business. And every time it would come up to a vote, Sam would say, no, I think we should just use the money for ourselves. And the partners would vote, and they'd always vote for the other man's ideas. Sam Andrews is getting upset. His pride is hurt. He never gets his way. His partner seems to always get his way. And his ego is wounded. And finally, in 1878, Andrews just had enough. I never get my way. No one ever listens to me. I don't get the money that I want to have this way. And so he just, one day in a meeting with his partners, he says, I'm tired of this business. I want out of the business. And the primary partner that always disagreed with him said, how much money do you want for your shares in the business? Andrews said, I want $1 million. Now this is 1878. $1 million is a lot of money. His partner says, I'll have a check for you tomorrow. The next day, Andrews walks out of the office building with the money order for $1 million. He's laughing and saying, finally, I got the best of that business partner of mine. Finally, look who's laughing now. But unfortunately, he hadn't gotten the best of his partner. Does anyone know, by the way, who Andrews' partner was? It was John Rockefeller. His company was Standard Oil. If he'd held on to that, in fact, Rockefeller took the $1 million in shares, went over to William Vanderbilt and sold them for $1.3 million, made a $300,000 profit, just like that. And Andrews began to suspect he might have just made a mistake. Of course, Standard Oil would become the largest, most profitable company in the world at that time. John Rockefeller would become the first billionaire who made $1 billion through business. If he held on to those shares, he would have owned 20% of ExxonMobil, 20% of Chevron, of Amoco, of Conoco, of British Petroleum. His descendants are still crying to this day about that business deal. He built the biggest house where he lived in Cleveland at the time, if that's something to be proud of, and it was a monstrosity, a hideous monstrosity of arrogance and pride, and he spent the rest of his days bemoaning the fact that he'd been cheated. He had been partnered with the greatest businessmen in American history. All he had to do was just hold on for the ride. Estimates are, if he just held on to those shares, within 15, 20 years, they would have been worth hundreds of millions of dollars. But his ego, his pride, made him do something rash. He focused on what didn't matter, getting his own way, instead of what did matter, was making wise, smart business decisions. I want you to look at the fact, and I suppose all of us, I certainly could, if I wanted to look back at my life and see regrets I have in my life. Oftentimes it was because I worried too much about what didn't matter, and I worried too little about what did. We actually, our ministry coaches people in business and just in life. And if someone were to sit down with me and say, Richard, I want more out of my life. I think I should be more successful in business. I should be more successful in my family. What would you suggest? If I only had one session with you, I would say, let me ask you 2 questions. What important things in your life are you not giving enough focus and attention to? And what things in your life that don't really matter nearly as much are you giving way too much energy, focus, attention? If you could just make that adjustment. You know, when I heard Logan crying, I thought to myself, you know, I'm so glad that adults always know what matters and we don't waste time on what doesn't. And I sense God saying, how many mornings have you opened your Bible because you knew that's what mattered? Spending time with your Creator. And then you just thought, well, I'm right here in front of my computer. Maybe I'll just check Facebook first and see what's going on Facebook. And an hour later, when I searched all kinds of trivial things that people I don't even know were doing, I realized, oh, I'm sorry, God, I don't really have as much time for you now as I know I should have given you. And God would say, you just did it too. You wasted way too much time on what doesn't matter, and you neglected what matters most. There's a wonderful passage in Luke. I just want to look at for a moment, and then just give you a couple of examples. Luke 22, verses 14 to 24, it says, when the hour had come, he sat down. And by the way, when it says the hour for Jesus, it's talking about when he's going to be crucified. Now Jesus, people estimate he walked on the earth for maybe 3.5 years. Well, he walked longer than that. His ministry was 3.5 years. And in that time, he fed 5,000 people. He calmed storms. He fed lots of people. He healed lots of people. He preached lots of sermons. But what was the number one most important thing Jesus came to the earth to do? To die. The most important thing, the one thing he had to do was to die for the sins of all humanity, so that we would not have to pay the price for our sins. He had to pay the price. Now, he has 3.5 years to do other things that were good things, but he knew there was one thing he had to do. So when you read, when the hour had come, what it's telling us is his primary purpose in life has now come. The one thing he's got to do, the single most important thing in Jesus' life. And so he gathers the 12 apostles with him. Then he said to them, with fervent desire, I have desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer. For I say to you, I will no longer eat of it until it is fulfilled in the kingdom of God. He said more. Now I'll get it to you here. We can move it on to that next slide there if you can for me. Then he took the cup and gave thanks and said, take this and divide it among yourselves. For I say to you, I will not drink of the fruit of the vine until the kingdom of God comes. And he took bread, gave thanks, and broke it, and gave it to them, saying, this is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. And go ahead and go to that next slide there, too. Likewise, he also took the cup after supper, saying, this cup is the new covenant in my blood, which is shed for you. But behold, the hand of my betrayer is with me on the table. And truly the Son of Man goes as it has been determined. But woe to that man by whom he is betrayed. Then they began to question among themselves which of them it was who would do this thing. Now there was also a dispute among them as to which of them should be considered the greatest. Now Jesus, the most important evening in his life, he's going to be arrested and taken away and ultimately crucified. He's going to die for all the sins of humanity. The most important event ever to take place on planet Earth is coming. It's looming. It's almost there. And then Jesus turns to his 12 disciples and says, but before that time comes, I fervently desire to spend time with you. And so they gather and they share a final meal. And Jesus institutes what we call the Lord's Supper or communion. And he tells them about the cup will represent my blood that's spilled for you. And this bread represents my body that's broken for you. And then Jesus basically says, I want you to, every time you partake of communion, what you're doing is you're remembering what mattered most to Jesus. I know your church did that. I think at Easter time you had your first communion service. And when you see the bread, you see the juice, it reminds us of what Jesus said was the most important. And of course, that's doing God's will, right? It's laying your life down for others. It's sacrificing yourself so others can experience life. It's about humility. Whenever you see the communion, you're reminded of what Jesus said was the most important things for us to remember. And I think the reason we partake communion is we tend to forget what matters. And so Jesus said, I want to keep reminding you so you don't forget. And so you get through that whole discussion. Then you get to the last verse. Now, they've just had Jesus tell them the most important things about his life and their life. And then the disciples begin speaking in that last verse. And of course, what comes out of our mouths reflects what? What does it reflect? What's in our heart, right? If you want to know what someone's thinking, listen to what they're saying. And so Jesus has just said, what matters, guys, is I'm going to lay my life down for you. I'm going to pour myself out. My blood will be spilled for you. My body will be broken for you. I just want to do God's will, and no matter what it costs me, so I can be a blessing and bring life to others. And then the disciples speak. And what are they talking about? Who's the greatest? Yeah, Jesus, that's all fine about you laying your life down for others, but can I be the vice president of administration? I want to be vice president of finance. And I want to have a big office. I want a corner office right next to yours, Jesus. And how big will my budget be? And when I read this a little while ago, I was just struck. Jesus has just gathered his 12 closest friends, his 12 disciples. He said, guys, I got to tell you this. Before I'm taken away from you, you've got to know what really matters. And after Jesus tells them that clearly, do you notice how completely out of touch those 12 disciples were? They didn't even get it, did they? Now, if those disciples could be sitting right across from Jesus and hear him tell them these things and still get it wrong, is it possible that you and I could get it wrong as well? That we could go into the day thinking that this was what really mattered in life, and Jesus would be saying, no. Just listen to me for a moment. I'll tell you, that doesn't matter. This over here does. I'll tell you what, wouldn't life be wonderful if we always focused on what mattered? And we didn't worry and fret and get upset about things that didn't. But the problem is that the world is constantly lying to us. Just turn on the TV, you'll be lied to. And the TV will tell you that this, buying this, owning that, going on that holiday, wearing these clothes, having this new iPhone is really what matters in life. If you don't have the new iPhone, you're a total loser and disgrace to humanity. Get out there and get that. Well, how could you have lived 2 weeks since it came out and not buy it yet? You're so far behind. The world lies to you all the time. And I'll tell you, I'm not necessarily a big materialistic kind of person, but I remember years ago, the big screen TVs were just coming out. And they were big in every way back then. They didn't just have a big screen, they were big deep as well. You had to get one of those those platforms you stuck it on, and you could turn it around. Like it took a whole corner of our living room just to put that TV in there. And so we just had a normal TV up to that point, and then I saw big screen TV. I mean, it's 32 inches, is all it was then. It wasn't huge. It was big then. 32 inches was enormous. But I saw that, and some worldly, fleshly, materialistic gene just started saying, you're a loser if you don't have that TV. Just think of what your family could be enjoying. Family evenings, watching TV together around this massive monstrosity of a TV. And I don't know what happened to me, because I'm normally not that materialistic about things. But I just began, I even began shopping. And I hate shopping. You know that I was desperate. I'm actually looking at different appliance places and TV stores. And I'm looking at magazines and looking for sales. And you know how you try to convince your spouse that this is actually a good deal? Last week they advertised this for $20 more. It's $20 less. And this weekend there's going to be a sale. And I've got this credit from some other purchase. And so really, it would almost be like they were giving it to me if I were to buy this at this time. And I mean, I'm just annoying Lisa with this. And finally, I just wore her down. She's like, hey, look, if you're that desperate to buy that hideous, huge TV, just get it done so I don't have to hear about it anymore. And it's like, well, okay, if you really want me to, I'll buy it for you then. So I go down, and I can hardly carry it into the house. It's so big. And I set it up. I have to buy a whole stand for it to fit in. You can only, it takes up a whole section of the living room now. And it was fine for a little while. Watch some hockey games on it. You could actually see the puck. It was big enough on that screen, and everything was fine. But eventually, we moved to a different house, and we just couldn't fit that TV in the living room area. So it was assigned to the man cave down in the basement. Lisa said, put that in the basement somewhere. I don't want to look at that up here anymore. So that was downstairs. I didn't watch it as much because I wasn't down there as much, but it was there. And then just years passed, and eventually we're moving away. We're going to move to the States. And I have to pay per pound to move things. And by this time, the TVs aren't like this wide anymore. Like they're very thin. You can hang them on your wall above your fireplace now. It's like a piece of paper. There's no thickness at all. So why would I hold this massive thick? I mean, it's this long, but it's this thick. And so I thought, finally, I just hate to part with my awesome TV, but I really can't afford to move that. And what it cost me to move it, I could just buy a new TV that's better and thinner. So maybe I should I'll bless a friend. I'll bless somebody. Give them. So I'm looking at what friend I could bless with. Why? None of my friends need the blessing. They don't want that blessing. Now we're getting ready. The movers are coming. So load up our stuff. I've got to get rid of this thing. Like I'm offering just give it away. I'm having to offer to pay people to take away this special TV. And at a certain point, as I'm just like begging someone please just take this TV off my hands. I've got to get rid of this junk. That's like God just quietly reminded me and said, do you remember when you just obsessed about that TV? Do you remember when that's all you could think about? You kept going online to see if it was any cheaper this week, if there's any sales going on. You spent all this time arguing about with your wife trying to build a case for why our family desperately needed this piece of electronics. And all the time you were doing that, what could you have been doing? Who could you have spent time with? What good things could you have been doing for other people? How could you have taken that same money and invested it in a way that it actually blessed people, maybe even for eternity? And now you thought that was so consuming to you, and today it's junk. It's junk. And you see, when you start obsessing about stuff, sometimes God will say, listen, I know a day is coming when this will be junk to you. It'll be on a garage sale table. You'll just want to get it out of the house. Don't overestimate how important this is in your life. Something that will one day be junk is not worth obsessing over. You use it, and then you put it in the junk pile, but you don't let it possess you. There's just so many different ways where I found that people begin to value some things way too much and value other things way too little. I know some sweet elderly ladies in the church that Mike came from that I'm a part of, and these sweet ladies, they've been in church all their life. These two ladies have been friends for over 50 years, half a century, and they were in each other's weddings. They were bridesmaids in each other's weddings. They've known each other all their lives, and in the last 20 or so years, they've lived in the same town together. And so every holiday, for many years, they didn't have any of their children living near them. And so whenever there was a holiday, these two ladies and their husbands would have celebrate dinner together. And they would divvy up the menu. If it's Thanksgiving dinner, okay, you get the turkey, I'll make the potatoes, I'll make the pecan pie, whatever it was they were having. Every holiday, they just knew they would spend it together. And they did that for a number of years. It was beautiful. These two friends are godly Christian ladies, have been in church all their lives. And then one day, a dark, ugly secret finally bubbled to the surface. For years, they had ignored it. They had not wanted to go there, but finally something drew it to the surface. And one woman just made a comment about, well, I'll bring the sweet potatoes. And her friend said, why don't I do that? Well, no, it's fine. I've got sweet potatoes. I can do that. And finally the friend said, well, can I just be honest with you? I've never liked the way you make sweet potatoes. And your friend said, well, now that we're being honest, I've never liked how you make sweet potatoes. And these two godly women have been in church all their life. It got so ugly that they decided for the next over a year that they just would have other friends. They would get together and not spend the holidays with each other. I don't know if you can go to that next slide there for me. That is a sweet potato casserole. And these two women who've been in church all their life, their friendship was coming apart over sweet potato casserole. And I'll tell you, God was good and intervened eventually, got their attention. But I remember at the time hearing about this, and I wanted to go to these two women and say, ladies, it's a vegetable. It's a vegetable with some marshmallows on top. That's not worth giving up a 50-year friendship over. Isn't it silly? You know, I've known a lot of, one of the most heart-wrenching times for families is over the holidays, of all things. Wouldn't you think that the holidays, when all your family are together, would be the greatest time, the most joyful time? But you know what happens a lot of times? Families start talking about politics, or they start talking about sports, and people are angrily walking out the door because they got an argument over which hockey team is going to win Stanley Cup. You'd say, why is it that even Christians sometimes can get focusing way too much about stuff that doesn't matter at all, and then focus way too little on things that do? As I get older, I just want to say, God, help me to know what matters and to know what doesn't matter. I tell you, one of the saddest times for me, I was speaking at a church in North Carolina, and the pastor, I wrote a book one time on grace, and the pastor said, Richard, I love your book on grace. Would you preach a sermon on that? Just kind of teach that. So I thought, okay, well, I could do that. So I preached a sermon. When I got to the end of the sermon, the pastor came up. There was kind of an altar call, time to respond, and then the pastor came up to me and he's in tears. And he said, Richard, he said, I just got to tell you what happened. I didn't know what happened. Was my sermon that bad? The pastor's in tears. I just finished it. And he said, but he told me the story. What happened was there was a couple in the church. They had one daughter. One child was a daughter. They loved this daughter. They doted on the daughter. And one day the daughter was marriageable age. She came home and she said, Mom, Dad, I'm engaged. I'm going to get married. And her parents said, oh, that's awesome. We've looked forward all your life to when you're going to get married. In fact, we've made plans. We've planned for years about your wedding day. They said, in fact, the mother said, I've actually saved my wedding gown that I got married in. And I thought that would be so awesome for you to get married in the dress I was married in. And we've always planned on you getting married in the same little chapel where we had our wedding. And we've saved money for this, and it's going to be so special. And at a certain point, the daughter said, well, Mom, Dad, I'm happy that you're excited for me, but I kind of had ideas for my own wedding dress. Mom, your dress was great for you, but I sort of have a different style I'm kind of thinking about it. And that chapel was good for you, but I want to get married in the church that I go to. And here, in this church. And her parents got upset. They got the feelings hurt. And they began to tell her how ungrateful she was. They had saved all this money, made all these plans, and done so much, and now she didn't even seem to care about their plans, and one thing led to another, words were spoken, and by the day of the wedding, as the father walks his daughter down the aisle, the parents are no longer speaking to their only child. And as soon as the ceremony was over, the parents left and didn't even stay for the reception. About a year and a half later, that daughter of theirs had a baby. These parents were now grandparents. And they all went to the very same church, the church that I had preached in that morning. And the pastor said, did you notice right over there, he said, and he described the couple. And he said, that's the couple. That's those parents. And he said, sitting just 2 rows up in front of them was their only daughter and their only grandchild. They came in with their little grandchild and a little carry-on little seat and set it in the seat. The grandparents have never held their only grandchild. They've never hugged that child. They've not hugged their daughter in a year and a half. And the pastor said, as you were preaching on grace, and you just said grace focuses on what matters. Sometimes what matters can be a hard thing, but you focus on what matters, and then you forgive, and you love, and you embrace, and you work it out. And I preached on that sermon, and the pastor said, you might as well have used their first name. He said, the whole sermon, everybody in the church knew that family right there desperately needs to hear that. And he said, I was just sure that when we had the altar call and the music began to be sung, that everybody knew that the parents would make their way up and just embrace their daughter and ask her to forgive them and to love on her. And she would ask to be forgiven, and they would, for the first time, those grandparents would come and pick up their only grandchild, and the whole church would just be in tears and praising God that God had helped these 2 families to realize what really mattered and what did not. And so he said the first verse began to sing, and every eye in that church was looking at those 2 couples. But nobody moved. Then the second verse was sung. And the third verse was sung. Finally, the final verse was sung. The closing prayer was prayed. And the parents stepped out in the aisle, and instead of going 2 rows up to their only child, they headed to the back of the auditorium, and they left the building. And the pastor has tears in his eyes. And he said, I just can't believe that they would care more about a dress than about a dollar. You go to the next picture there on the screen there. Can you imagine? What's more important? A dress or a child's baby? But can I tell you, this is not uncommon. This happens all the time. We're all guilty of that, right? We all get consumed with stuff, and maybe this matter, this issue, and before we know it, what really matters has been neglected. I'll just tell you one last story, Mike, because I have many stories I could tell you where I've done that very thing. And I remember years ago, I was at the office. I was a president of a school just outside of Calgary, Alberta, and I was meeting with my leadership team. And well, by the way, maybe I should just say one other thing first. Go to that next verse for a second. This is really important. Oops, I just really blew right by there. Can you pull that back to? Okay, I'm sorry. There we are. So how do you know? I mean, how can you know? Because we're all going to make mistakes, right? We've all failed at this. We've all fallen short. But we don't want to, right? We want to go through every day knowing what matters and knowing what doesn't matter. And Jesus said an interesting thing. He said in John 16:13, he said, however, when he, the Spirit of truth, has come, he will guide you into all truth. For he will not speak on his own authority, but whatever he hears, he will speak, and he will tell you things to come. What he was saying is, when you become a Christian, you have something that unbelievers don't have. You have the Holy Spirit. Jesus said he's the Spirit of truth. And you know what he's going to tell you? In every situation in your life, that Spirit of truth is going to tell you the truth. He's going to tell you, sweet potatoes don't matter. Friends matter. He's going to say, dresses don't matter. Trust me, don't. The Spirit of God, if you get to learn to recognize the Spirit's voice, you'll hear that voice over and over again. Say, don't worry about that. Don't stress on that. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Hey, come over here. This does matter. You're not spending time here. You're not investing here. And if you listen to the Spirit of truth, he will help you to not make that mistake. If you'll just trust his voice, he always knows what matters and what does not. And you get to a certain age, you just realize, God, the time I have left, help me to get it right. When you get old, like me, as Mike likes to tell me, I don't have so many years ahead to get it right. But I'll tell you what, I love seeing young families, because when you're a young family, that's when you really need help to know what matters. Because you get tired, you get stressed, you get financial issues, you've got pressures at work, you've got all kinds of things, running kids here and there, and if you're not careful, you can forget what matters, and you can focus on what doesn't. And I was in that place. I had kids. Mike was probably just a young teenager, I guess, maybe just like 13 or so. And I'm at the school. I'm running the school. And I get a call from Lisa. And she says, Richard, you need to come home. Well, what? Was the house on fire? Is there something wrong? She said, well, almost that bad. It involves Mike. And now you probably are amazed that Mike ever caused me a moment of grief growing up. But we had built the only time I ever was in a new house, I had this house built. It's perfect. It's unblemished. There's not a blemish on it. Everything is, I've never been in an unblemished house before. Not a scratch on it, not a mark, not a pot mark, nothing. And we had very heartfelt discussions with my boys, especially, about how to behave in this unblemished, unpaid for house. I talked in moving detail about like resale value and depreciation when you trash out a house, because I worried about my boys especially, and so Mike and Daniel's brother were playing street hockey, and I had a long discussion in vivid detail about not firing projectiles toward my house that had no marks on it whatsoever. But for some reason, my son thought that I didn't know what I was talking about, that he was perfectly fine to do that, and he had put a hockey ball through the garage window. And now I'm missing a window in my house. And so of course, I'm driving home, and I'm thinking, Now what matters here? I need to know what matters. Well, Mike needs to understand that property is, you don't trash out property. If you're going to live in a nice house, you can't be careless. And he also needs to understand that when things have consequences. You don't obey your father, there's a consequence for that. And there's a price to pay. And money doesn't come cheap. You have to work and earn that. So I'm thinking, what do I need to do? Now, Mike had no money. He didn't have a job at that time. So I know he can't just pay for it. The simple thing would be just have him pay for it, but he can't afford to. He has no money. So I'm already working up a plan. I will drag that son door to door in the neighborhood, offering his slave labor until he can earn back everything it takes to pay for the damage. And then he'll understand, next time he thinks about firing a projectile toward my house, he'll think twice and realize, oh, I'm a better man now for that. I know better than that. I know what is important now. And so all the way home, I'm trying to think, okay, he needs to learn responsibilities, my oldest son. And if I chastise my oldest son, it'll probably strike a bit of terror in the younger two siblings, and that can't hurt. Maybe we'll get some mileage out of this whole disciplinary issue. And so I pull into the house, I walk into the door, and there's my wife Lisa at the bottom. Now Mike's room he's up in his room on the top floor. Lisa's at the bottom of the stairs. She sensed this is going to be trouble, and she said, Richard, I just have to tell you, Mike feels really bad about what he did. I said, good. But I think I can take his feeling bad to a whole other level. I think he could feel really bad. And I think this is a perfect time to do, because I just feel like I was not a big fan of disciplining all the time, but I figured if you're going to discipline, it should be memorable, so that it has a lasting effect for years to come. And so I'm brushing by. Lisa said, I'll handle this. This is what I do. And I'm going up the stairs, and I've got my speech ready about how he's going to work this thing off. He's going to learn responsibility, and he's going to make me promise that he's going to obey what his father tells him from this point onward. And I open the door, and Mike's on his bed, and I can. The moment I looked at Mike's face, I can tell he is troubled. Mike's a responsible guy. Even as a kid, he was responsible, and he's just beating himself because he knows I told him not to. He knows that he's just damaged the house. He knows it's going to cost me money to repair this thing. And so it took me back. I mean, I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting my son to be defiant, and I would be all over that. But he's looking at me just kind of like upset with himself. And so I just, all of a sudden I thought, maybe that's not the right speech to give after all. What is the right speech? And while I'm trying to sort of recalibrate what I'm going to do, Mike speaks up and says, Dad, I'm so sorry. He said, I know he told me not to do that. It was a crazy thing to do. I don't know what I was thinking. But I'm going to pay it back. He said, I don't have any money right now, but when I get, you pay for it, give me the bill, and I'll pay you back every penny of that because I know I did it, I'll pay for it. And have you ever just heard yourself saying something and you wonder where on earth did that come from? All of a sudden I hear myself say, Mike, just forget about it. Just forget about it. Don't even worry about it. Wait a minute, that's not what I intended to say. I said, I got more money than you. Just next time you want to play street hockey, play in the neighbor's driveway, will you? And I walk out the door. And so, about, I don't know, like a month or two later, it's his birthday. Which is actually coming up here this next week. And it's his birthday, and that's always the richest day he was. I mean, because his grandparents would give him money, his uncles and aunts would give him money, and he was the wealthiest. He'd live a whole year off his birthday loot that he would get. And so he's got all this loot, and I want to take his friends to play laser tag. And so we're going into Calgary. Over in the industrial area, there's this big labyrinth of laser tag. And by the way, you can go to that next picture there. I want you to see a younger picture of Mike there. That's Mike. And so we're going to go into this laser tag. And so I've got a minivan filled with Mike and all of his friends. And because you have to pick a name, and so they're trying to think of the toughest sounding name that in the human language, that will terrorize all their other friends. And they're trash talking each other. And you run around this darkened maze with smoke, and you're shooting lasers at each other. It's what boys like to do. And so we're going along, and I'm trying to find this place. It's in an industrial area, and I'm driving around. I haven't been to this park before. And as we're driving around, I see there's a person kind of standing on a street corner, And I kind of glance at them. They're just standing there. They're not doing anything. So I just keep going. Well, as soon as I go through the intersection, a traffic policeman pulls me over and says, pulls me over, says, you have to yield to pedestrians. I said, well, they didn't look like they were crossing the street. They weren't giving any indication they were crossing. Well, it doesn't matter. If they're on the corner, you have to stop. So he starts, and of course, everything's gone silent in the van. All the boys have stopped talking. Like, Mr. Blackaby is getting taken down by the cops. And it's all embarrassing, and it's all real silent. So I think, well, I'll try the sympathy vote. So I said, well, it's my son's birthday. I was a little distracted. It's his birthday today. We're just trying to celebrate as a family and friends. And he's hard as stone. Just wrote it out, gave me the ticket. And so we go on. We get to the park, and and there's a little room there where we're going to have the party afterward. And so I'm in there kind of claiming the space. And all the boys are getting their weapons and signing in. And all of a sudden I turn around, and Mike's standing there. And like, Mike, what are you doing? And why aren't you getting your weapon? Why aren't you getting ready? And I can tell he has something he wants to say. And he says, Dad, if it wasn't for my birthday today, you wouldn't have gotten that. And he said, if you weren't driving me and my friends here, you would never have been there. You would never have gotten that ticket. And I looked down, and he's holding all of his birthday money. He said, I don't know if this will pay for the whole ticket, but it's all I've got. He said, at least I could give you that. And I remember in that moment just thinking back 2 months earlier, when I was thinking, what I need to give this son is a whole lot of law. I need to say, son, when you mess up, you got to pay up. You break the law, there's a price to pay. And I realized all the way home, the Spirit of God was saying, no, this time just show him grace. Show him grace. Now, it doesn't mean you don't ever discipline your child. It doesn't mean you don't ever make them pay consequences. That day, the Spirit of God said, on that day, the most important thing is just show your son grace. And I had no idea that 2 months later, I thought to myself, you know what, if I'd given my son what I thought was the most important, 2 months later, when I got that ticket, my son would have said, Dad, you break the law, you got to pay the price. You mess up, you got to pay up, Dad. That's how the world works. That's what you always taught me. Instead, fortunately, on that occasion, God said, just show him grace this time. And I did. And within 2 months, that same little kid is showing me grace. Because that's what I showed him. And the Spirit of God was saying, just trust me. When I start giving you a little prompting to say, you know what, don't do that. This isn't the time. Maybe this time is the time, but not now. Not here. Not over this. The Spirit of God wants us to know what matters and what doesn't matter. Now, just put that last picture up there. You know this picture because you see this in real life all the time. But when Mike told us he was going to come here, he was in a great church, great life, had a great home, was around all his family. And but basically he said, but Dad, there's a lot of people in the Victoria area who need to know that there's a God of grace. That they've also gotten a lot of lies told to them, a lot of misconceptions. That someone needs to go. And I thought back to that kid that I was just trying to raise up, just to know what he should do. And I just had to say, Spirit of God, Spirit of truth, help me to always know what matters and what doesn't. Because you don't want to look back on your life and have a whole lot of regrets because you worried way too much about what did matter and you worried way too little about what did. Well, let me take just a moment to pray with you. Maybe just bow your heads for a moment and you know that Spirit of truth is in this room right now. And he knows what's going on in your life right now. And he knows that perhaps there's some things you're worried way too much about. That the Spirit of God would say, you don't even need to worry about that. But there's something over here in your life you need to give a lot more attention to that you haven't been. I know people that will spend literally hours watching the news, worrying about the news. And they won't spend 15 minutes here. The Spirit of God would say, let me tell you the truth. You want to have a lot less anxiety in your life? Watch a lot less news and read a lot more of this. But we tend to focus on the wrong things and not enough on the right things. Maybe the Spirit of God would just be saying to you, we could make some adjustments, and you could experience some freedom. Maybe even in some relationships, you may be focused on the wrong things, and the Spirit of God would say, let me help you. You don't want to be the parents focusing on a dress instead of a baby. You want to be the people that, you want to be known as the people that always seem to know what mattered and what didn't. And you just breezed right past the stuff that didn't matter, and you kept making a beeline for what did matter. Live your life that way. It's a great way to live. I'm going to pray for you, and it might be that even before you leave tonight, you just need to come to Pastor Mike and maybe say, you know, Mike, that's me. I've been guilty of that. Would you just pray with me that as I go into this week, I get this week right. We can't go back and get last week right. But we can get tomorrow right, can't we? Make sure you're in a place where you can hear everything the Spirit of Truth has to say to you. And say, Spirit of Truth, just open all frequencies. So if I start going down the wrong path, you can just alert me and redirect me so I spend my life where it really matters. So let me pray with you, and I'll be done. Lord, thank you for these wonderful people who have been here tonight. And the fact they're here tonight suggests to me that they sense what matters. Lord, to be giving this time to you before your word. And Lord, that's the wonderful thing about church. Church lets us recalibrate our life. It lets us focus again about what matters and what doesn't matter. And Lord, I pray even tonight as we worshiped you and we heard from your word and we just heard some examples of what that might look like. I pray that perhaps you've spoken to us. I know that you have. And I know that, Lord, you love us so much. You want us to get life right. We only get one life, Lord, and I know you want us to get it right. So help us if we've fixated way too much on stuff that doesn't matter. Would you help us, Lord, to just release that and to see it for what it is? It's just it's a casserole. It's a dress. It doesn't matter. It's a TV that's becoming antiquated. God, just deliver us from the bondage of being enslaved to things that don't even matter. And God, may we always know what really does. Help us to hear your voice and to invest our lives where you invest your life here in our world. Help us this week, Lord, if we need to make an adjustment to do so that we get Monday right as we enter it tomorrow. And I pray this in Jesus' name.
This can sneak up on you sometimes. Yeah, we're just going to do just the first verse in the chorus of this song. Just to kind of center our minds, center our hearts on just the simplicity of what is actually important. So let's just take a couple minutes just to focus on Jesus, his name and everything that it means to us. You were the Word, the beginning, one with God, the Lord Most High.
life, no matter what generation you are, it's easy to get things mixed up and focus on the wrong thing. And when I became a father, that became very real for me. It's very easy for me to focus on other things besides what God has entrusted me with. And ultimately, if you put your focus on Jesus, when you do that, everything else that needs to be in the peripheral moves to the peripheral. And as you follow Him, He guides you to the places you need to be, the things you need to do. And you can trust Him. You can trust that He'll guide you to the important things. Canvas is all about helping people discover their place in the story, the family, and the mission of God. The story in that God's been doing something throughout history that is amazing, and you're part of that. And maybe even tonight, you would be reminded, or maybe for the first time, that God loves me, and that I'm part of a bigger story, that my life is actually part of something bigger, and that God would take you, put you into the family of God, the church. Say, life is not meant to be walked alone. You walk with other people. And then the mission of God, saying, and I have a purpose for your life, and go in that purpose. And so again, thank you for being here. If this is your first time here, there's these envelopes on the chairs. If you wouldn't mind filling one of those out with your information, I would love to meet you personally afterwards and exchange that card for a small gift, just to say thanks for being here tonight. I want to send you away with a little something that just says thanks for being here. Also, if my father has written some books, he mentioned one of them, and if you're a reader or if you want something to be encouraged by on your journey in the days ahead, I've grabbed a few of those off of my library, and I put them over there. And it's my birthday on Tuesday, so I guess I should have a birthday cake too. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear one. Happy birthday to you. Wow, thank you guys. I'm not going to sing because I'm holding a mic. Thank you guys so much. Big number 34 this year. So they're starting to come faster. But hey, thank you guys for being here. Obviously, there's cake, and so please grab a piece of cake. If maybe sugar this time of evening is not good for you, take one to go. We'd be happy for you to take one to go. And like I said, there's some books on the back. Take a picture of those. Those aren't to take with you, but you can take a picture of them and grab them on Amazon. Hey, let me pray for us. Let me send this out, and maybe we can stand together. Let's stand one last time. Let me pray for us as we go. God, we thank you. We thank you that you love us. And we thank you that you give us opportunities to show love to each other. And I thank you for being able to show love to our community yesterday. Thank you for an opportunity coming up this next Saturday to show love to our community. And we pray that as we interact with the people of Oak Bay and Victoria, that they would come to know a little bit of what you are like through somehow you working through us, that we would show grace, that we would show love, that we would be quick to forgive. God, that you would make us intentional each day to pray and to seek your guidance before we enter into a day and say, God, would you help me today to focus on what matters?
Yeah.
God, will we begin our days by focusing on you, that all the rest that follows would be a result of your activity in and through our lives. Thank you for each person here. I pray that you would bless them this week. God, tomorrow, would you use their life in an incredible way? Would you give us opportunities to show love to others? That next week we would gather together and be excited to tell each other the stories of what we saw you do in Victoria, for you were at work. Thank you for calling us to be a part of what you were doing. And love you. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you guys. And we'll see you. Get some cake.